Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another weekly wrap up. What a week it's been. As always, never a dull moment in the crypto space. We've had some news. There's been DeFi hacks or exploits, if you want to call it that. There's always something going on. We had a very sharp move down midweek at the start of the week here in the crypto space. Some of you guys caught the live stream. So this is going to be an update on some of those moves. What am I watching here? It's been a pause for the last couple of days, a little bit of a breather, a slight bounce. But now that we're seeing the bounce, the question is, where do we go from here? Is this just an oversold bounce? Do we see another leg down? Or was that it? And off to the races again. And so I'm going to explore both angles as well as point out a few names to keep an eye on here for the upside if this market resumes. Just keep in mind what I've been saying here. Bigger picture, longer term. I'm still very bullish on the alts overall for 2020, and I'm looking for some continued outperformance versus Bitcoin. So got to keep an eye on those. And there's a few names that are setting up, some that are holding up relatively well. I'll point out a few of those here towards the end of the video, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time here at the start just kind of covering the overall market metrics, the dominance chart, and looking at Bitcoin and ETH in a little bit more depth. So let's get to it here. Looking at the Node Insiders metrics here, of course, we're still showing red here, a little bit of yellow popping back on the board here on the 4-hour chart, but the higher time frames certainly showing red. The bot status did go flat on that second spike down. Again, no surprise there. And so still showing flat. On the trending list, it's primarily the small cap / micro cap names that are leading the pack here. So not a lot of depth to the market, as most of the big cap names, which had been prior leaders, are taking a little bit of a breather here relative to Bitcoin. But on the list here, Tomo Chain looking pretty good. Power has been all over the place, but get those quick big moves if you can catch those. Elgarand has been leading the way here the last few days, and a few other small cap names, but Chainlink still here, Waves showing up. Tizo is, of course, very strong, probably the strongest name in the market overall versus Bitcoin, but I will cover this chart here in a little bit more depth shortly because there are some caution signs to be watching here in the near term. So let's get to that here. Looking at the Bitcoin price chart here. So what I want to point out is the key support levels that I've been watching here. Now I have some Fibonacci retracement levels marked out, and I'm using the impulse move which started here on January 2nd as my starting point, not the exact low, which was that wick low on December 18th. I'm not using that, but I'm actually using the start of the impulse move here, which kind of led to this most recent leg up, which topped out around that 11,550 mark. And so looking at the pullback levels here, the 382 level, which is the first key ratio that we want to watch, lines up pretty well with this support zone in and around that 9100 level, 9150, give or take. And so far, price has held above that. Now, this day here, however, is bearish. I mean, technically very bearish. We had a drop, a little bit of a dip, no big deal, was at the moving averages, then price rallied, and we made a lower high, and it was a very quick move down, which undercut the prior low, so technically also made a lower low on that same candle, and the volume there was pretty high compared to the prior several days. And so technically speaking, that's a bearish engulfing candle on high volume, lower high. So you got to remain cautious until this is negated, until we can finally take out that level. And the key level to be watching are those highs, right? Basically that 10-2 number. If it starts to close above that, that would really negate this big pattern. But for now, we're seeing a little bit of a bounce from this support level. So the first line in the sand is really that 9150 level, in and around there, has held. But I'm keeping an eye on it here because this has the potential to set up for a little bit of a bounce, which will ultimately take that level out if it drops lower and just continue this pattern of lower lows and lower highs, which personally, you know, unless I'm proven otherwise, personally, that's the camp that I'm still in right now. I'm still thinking we get a little bit more pullback here, and it's not going to be like, you know, I'm not looking for a bear market type of pullback, but just a pause from this big move up that we've seen. Because remember what I've pointed out is that big picture on the weekly chart could be setting up that big inverse head and shoulder pattern. And even this little couple of weeks of pullback is healthy. Because if you're looking at this cup and handle here, however you want to look at it, at the end of the day, it's the same scenario. We rallied right up to resistance. We're pulling back and making a little bit of a handle here and potentially setting up for that strong breakout over 10.5. That'd be ideal. And so some pullback action here is not that big of a deal in my opinion. It's actually quite healthy. Kind of lets things cool off. Things were getting a little bit euphoric here in the short run because of the strong move we saw since the start of 2020. And it's been great across the alt space as well as BTC. The BTC dominance continues to drop. So all in all, good stuff. But in the near term, still kind of taking a cautionary stance here. My trading has been a little bit more active on the short term and just kind of doing some scalps, little quick shorts, quick spikes on the bounce trade, and watching this here in the near term. So that's the first key level. If it breaks below that, then in and around that 9K to 87, 8,800 is what I'd be looking for next as your support. That's the 50% retracement there. That's also a little bit of a measured move if you do a target there, but that's what I'm watching here. Let's zoom in here and looking at that 4-hour chart. Again, shows a little bit more detail to that action we saw here this week. We saw this bounce, and then of course that one single candle which just really spiked everything down, and we're still within the range of that candle. If you look at the low of that candle here on Coinbase, that was at just below 9,300, 92.75, 92.79, and on the upside, I mean, it started way up here at 10.1, just below that 10.2 mark. So there's a wide range there, and we're seeing a little bit of a bounce. Honestly, I was expecting a stronger bounce. I was thinking we'd see a sharper move up, which would have made a lower high, and then the quick turn. We saw this wild action yesterday, this shakeout. It looked like it got going, then had a quick pullback. I took an opportunity to go long there on that spike just because we had already seen the shakeout. But, the bounce has been pretty mild, to be honest. Not too excited with how it's been playing out. So just started to scale out. Again, it was a quick, fast trade, not that big of a deal. Smaller position size than I normally take. Just kind of keeping an eye on things here. But now I'm watching this bounce as it hits this 4-hour moving averages, which are trending lower. It's right there now. Let me highlight that for you guys. It's right here. So this is an interesting point between here and around 9,900. If it starts to fail in and around this zone, then look for a potential second leg down here as we head into the weekend. Now this is going to be what I'm going to be watching for. Does it stop here above this most recent wick low, continue to make this higher low, and just kind of solidify that above this 9,200 level is new support now and then get going? Or does it just continue and we finally break that level and make some new relative lows here? And so that's going to be the thing to be watching for here in the near term. If you get this little double bottom type of action here above 9,200 on the 4-hour charts, that's actually quite positive. At that point, I personally will likely get a little bit more aggressive to the long side and start looking at those alts again, which are still what I'm liking more here in the near term for some continued outperformance. But for now, just watching this one as it bounces right into these exponential moving averages, potential resistance starting to show up here. Looking at the ETH picture, ETH BTC here. Now I'm going to show the bull case and the bear case here. I'm going to kind of look at both sides here. Actually, let's go to the ETH USD side. So similar action here, but this one was a little bit different in the sense that it didn't make a lower high on that most recent bounce that we saw. In fact, it came almost exactly to the same level, couldn't crack that 287 number, which is what I was looking for. And then of course we saw that big spike down along with the rest of the markets. And right now we're seeing a little bit of a bounce, but I'm watching this lower trend line as it bounces right into these moving averages. And more importantly, that 270 number was really the bounce target that I was looking for. A little bit of a 265 to 270. We're right there, right at the moving averages. So now it's decision time. Is it going to hold this lower trend line and start spiking higher and crack right through that and straight to 280? Or does it finally crack here to the downside and give us that next leg down? If it gives us that next leg down, my target on this is 230 to 220. I know that's unpopular opinion right now, but if this does form a double top and this is a bear flag, then I don't expect this 240 number to hold. I'm looking for at least 230, which would put us back into this zone right here, or 220, which is the lower end of that zone. That'd be my first target on this. That's also the measured move on that double top, if that's the scenario that's playing out. And so that's the bear case scenario, right? A break from this neckline sees a pretty quick spike down, and we're in the 230 to 220 level. Longer term, I think that'd be an ideal place to start looking at it again. But near term, I'm a little bit cautious here, especially with this bounce kind of the way it's looking here. So just keeping an eye on it here. That's the bear case. What about the bullish scenario here? Looking at the bull case here, I'm going to zoom out and go to the daily chart here, because as we know, ETH has been one of the strongest names in the market here recently. Resilient, good relative strength versus Bitcoin, and it needed a pause, it needed a breather, and we're getting it here, which is good. So I mean, it's funny because when you look at the bigger picture, after all the hoopla and all the craziness and the bearishness sentiment that we're seeing here, finally ETH didn't even close below the daily 10 EMA. I mean, it was right at the line. It did wick below it a few times, but I mean, look at that. It's held the line. The 22 EMA is still way down here at 238. So I mean, with considering all the, you know, the reaction that we've seen here, it's really not that bad in the big scheme of things. So if you look at the bullish case, you know, this is setting up a bullish ascending base here. You have this wick here on that first drop, which brought it to around 236. The most recent drop here that we saw this week brought it to 245 so far. And so if it holds up here and doesn't break down and doesn't give us that bear flag drop, then this is actually looking quite bullish here. And what I would be looking for here is that very healthy ascending base consolidation where you're making higher lows and you're still below this horizontal price point, but what it does is it sets up for a strong break over that 290 mark. At that point, then you're looking, you know, at 320 and above that is your target. So positive action from that perspective if it can hold up here and not break below that trend line. So got to look at both scenarios here. Again, one of the stronger names in the market. So if the market decides to resume its uptrend, I expect Ethereum to continue to do its outperformance to the upside. Looking at it from the BTC pair, again, very strong action all around on the daily chart. Didn't even close below the daily 10 EMA, barely even wicked to it on the BTC pair. So still holding up very well versus Bitcoin. And this again has allowed the RSI to cool off a little bit and let things kind of take a breather and settle out, to which we needed here. Again, I was playing the short side in the short term, wasn't necessarily bearish long term. As you guys know, I'm still very much bullish for 2020 over the longer term, and I think these dips that we see, these pauses, are actually, you know, longer term picture good opportunities to start looking at some of these names that have pulled back. And so that's what I've been doing here. But in the near term, of course, from the trading perspective, I certainly take advantage of both sides of the market, whether it's long or short, but always kind of keeping the bigger picture in mind, because this is still very much positive. It's still holding up. Now, if it starts to break below, you know, on the ETH BTC pair, if it starts to break below that 2600 level, then the picture starts to change a little bit. Then you start to lose some near-term support, and then yes, at that point the USD pair will likely drop further, and I'd be looking at, you know, your next level down here, or the next big support, which is down here. So those are the two levels to be watching. But for now, the trend remains your friend, and until that changes, you got to keep the big picture in mind and give the benefit of the doubt to the bulls, which have so far remained resilient here. So let's look at the BTC dominance chart and some of the total market cap picture. So the daily view of the BTC dominance chart continues to favor the alts. We've seen this drop, a little bit of a rally, and it finally started to go as we started 2020, and we've seen a nice acceleration to the downside, which of course translates into strong altcoin outperformance. Finally hit that 62% number I was looking for. We did see a bounce here as the market takes a breather, Bitcoin resuming a little bit of dominance there, but not a strong bounce. It's going to be interesting to see if this bounce continues. If it does, I'm looking for around 66, maybe 67 as kind of the bounce target here, and then resuming some more downside action from there, which means I'm expecting the alts to outperform Bitcoin if the market resumes its uptrend here. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. I'm still thinking we get a little bit more bounce, so if I had to choose, I'd wait on the alts and maybe favor BTC here for now. But if it drops below this 62 again, it's back on. Alt's going to be really moving largely. And again, keep in mind that this chart is largely dominated by the top 10 names, those big cap names. And so even if you get those really strong moves out of some of the small mid cap names, it doesn't really influence this that much. And so you can kind of have kind of this stealth rally in the mid-tier, small-tier names, and it won't really show up on this chart here until those big cap names start showing up. So that's just something that I always make note of here, because this is primarily dominated by those names. So when ETH and XRP and EOS and Litecoin are really rallying, then this chart is dropping here. So just something I watched there. Looking at the total dominance chart here, back to that 277 mark. Again, little bit of a pullback underway. Do we finally hold or do we crack and make new lows? I'm looking at 250 as the next downside target. If it does drop on the upside, getting back over that 290 mark, things are probably back off to the races, and we'll take out the prior highs here around 305. And then at that point, you're looking at $340 billion market cap as the next major target here. But going back to the bot status here and some of these names, there's been a few names on the big cap list that have held up. One name in particular that I'm watching is Atom Cosmos. This one here has been underperforming Bitcoin for the last 2 months. It's been in a downtrend, and I know some of you guys are asking, why is this one short versus Bitcoin when everything is so strong? The USD pair was certainly holding up, but it was underperforming BTC here. So if the choice was between Cosmos or BTC, the answer was BTC for the last 2 months. But now that's starting to change here. It's showing some potential reversal action taking place. So I'm keeping an eye on this one here. It is a bullish BMI rating, but the bot status is still flat on both of these here. BAT BTC showing long here. ETH showing long on both the daily and the 4-hour chart, even though it's flashing caution there. Link, one of the stronger names right now here. And of course, Tezos, which has been resilient here as of late, showing long here. And so let's go look at some of those names. And then I'm going to point out a few of the small cap names or mid cap names that I'm watching here that I think should be kept an eye on if this market resumes its uptrend here. So starting with Cosmos. So looking at this chart, you can see here since December 26, we've been in this broader downtrend. Not a huge pullback, but certainly has underperformed Bitcoin as the price continued to rally on that side. The USD pair has just kind of gone flat and sideways here, but you're seeing this broader downtrend for the last 2 months. And now we're starting to see some support show up here around this 4,300 mark on the BTC pair. And volume is starting to kick back in as it attempts another rally into that descending trend line. It still hasn't taken out to the last lows and prior highs, so that's what I'm going to be watching here, but it's right there. It's kind of at the decision point here. You want to see it start holding above this line, which is around that 5,000 level. So starting to hold above that would be positive, especially with the volume coming in. And so if this market resumes the uptrend, I'm going to be watching this one for some potential catch-up play, because it really did underperform most of the bigger cap names here recently, but certainly one to be watching here on the upside if it starts to bounce from these levels. On the Atom USD pair, sitting flat, kind of just sitting tight here recently and holding up, but over that $5 mark, if it starts to hold above that, then that could signal the next breakouts. And at that point, I'd be looking for mid sixes as your next target. So in and around these most recent highs. And so that's what I'm watching here. Again, volume positive on this bounce. Still below resistance, still below these most recent little highs here, but it's held up relatively well. And we've seen this chart just kind of flatten with some support showing up around that lower $4 range. $4 kind of even mark is certainly held up here, so you don't want to give it much more than that. Otherwise, then that's a break of trend, the range there, and you see the trend start to turn to the downside. But on the BTC pair, looking like it wants to finally find a little bit of a low to bounce from and get going again. Again, this one had a strong move in Q4, and it finally took a breather. Maybe that pullback is done, and we're getting ready to see another leg up. So one I'm definitely going to keep an eye on here. Tezos, looking at XTZ, which has been resilient here. But looking at this one is interesting because, yes, it's a little bit extended. There's no question about that. The RSI continues to live here at the highs. The volume is positive. They're just going to see a ton of volume coming in. On the daily chart, the trend is still your friend, still holding strong, making new highs, all that good stuff. But in the lower time frames, I'm starting to see some signs of distribution here, potential caution flag being flashed. So if we go to that 4-hour chart, the RSI is showing bearish divergence here in this most recent rally, not confirming the new push to the higher highs. And so that's generally a little bit of a red flag for me. You're also seeing the volume spike here on the sell side, showing there's a little bit of churn happening, some distribution, some selling going on here at these upper levels. And so if you're in the bull camp, best case would be just some sideways choppy action here, which would set up a new base. and let things kind of cool off a little bit and then get going again. But I'd be cautious here. Longer term, that's a different story, right? Some people are thinking this one's going way higher, and that's fair. But near term, you know, it's always a challenge as to avoiding the FOMO when everything's going up and this one's just rallying. And people are saying, oh man, you know, when I start seeing these technical signals, the distribution, the bearish divergence, if I wanted to initiate a position, I generally will wait until this resolves itself, whether it's, you know, kind of going sideways for enough time and then finally breaking up, or finally getting that pullback and looking for the dip. I wouldn't necessarily FOMO in here and build a big position at these highs, considering the most recent price action. So those are my thoughts, but definitely one to keep an eye on here for a potential pullback here. Looking at the USD side, similar price action here. The bearish divergence showing up on that RSI, the big volume here near the highs on the sell side, and of course the new relative highs not really confirming yet on the RSI. So just a yellow flag, I guess is what I would call it, something to be watching here, because if it does start to break down and if it gets back below this most recent breakout point here, so on the USD side, I'd call that around $3.40. Below that, then I'm looking for a drop down to, you know, this most recent level here, just below $3, maybe 285 as your first stop here on the downside. If you go to the daily chart, all that would do is put it right back at the 22 EMA anyway, so wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you are seeing that RSI kind of cool off here a little bit, so just caution remains there on that one. Avoid the FOMO and generally look for better risk reward entries is what I try to do there. So looking at VeChain USD, some of these names have pulled back to some interesting levels here on this most recent drop. This one had a nice breakout from this ascending base, rallied, made new highs here, new relative highs, and has pulled back. This is the VeChain USD pair on Binance. And if we zoom in here, I'm looking at a potential bounce point from here. Now, it's tested it here twice on that 4-hour chart, potential little double bottom forming. You got this one showing up right there. Double test, trying to get going here right now. So you've got a clear line in the sand on the downside. If it starts to lose this level around that 6200.062, then this negates the whole, you know, kind of setup that I'm looking at here. But if it starts to really get going and gets back above that 0.07 level, then that really starts to confirm that we're going to see a little bit more bounce action. So some of those names that have pulled back are looking interesting here. ICX is another one here. I'm going to go to ICX USD actually. And another one that has been in pullback mode. Now remember, this one had that very strong move, kind of went sideways flat, finally had that drop, but it's recovered pretty quick. And I'm watching this one here as it bounces right back over that 4-cent mark. Certainly one that has shown some resilience on this bounce. We've been watching this one here a little bit on the Slack group. Some of you guys have been posting about it. The pullback looked ideal. It came right to the 618 level on the BTC pair. It's bouncing a little bit here, so definitely one to watch potential resumption of the uptrend after a very strong move. Pulled right back, found support right at the 618 level, and already has seen a decent bounce versus Bitcoin from that mark, up around 32% just from that bounce level. And it always fascinates me, even though, I mean, I've seen it over and over and over, it just always fascinates me when you see price respect some of these Fibonacci retracement zones and some of these key horizontal price points. You know, on the surface, they just look like these, you know, arbitrary lines in the sand, these arbitrary price points. But the fact that is, a lot of people are watching these levels, and you get the buyers start coming in here at certain points. They don't always work, but at those levels, those key turning points are generally some interesting points to start making bets on and looking at, hey, potential risk reward favor on this guy. So that's what I'm watching for here. But this one's showing some good action on the upside already. USD pair looks like it might want to finally push through that resistance there. Tomo has been on the trending list here, rallied. It's been a little bit choppy. Again, these smaller cap names, wide and loose. I mean, look at the wicks here, just all over, very tough. But it is trying to hold above this resistance now. So one to watch above that 5,800 level if it can hold up. Bigger picture, I'm going to zoom out here. You know, finding a little bit of a low, good volume starting to come here near term. Maybe ready to get going again here. Aeon's another one. Aeon BTC here has been in this pullback mode again as well after a very strong move here in February, but has found some support around that 1100 mark on the BTC pair. Still below this broader trend line here on the downside, but it is attempting to clear that. So I'd be watching that here. Also holding the moving averages on that daily chart on the upside. So that's good. And just watching this one here. At this point, you want to see this near-term pattern of higher lows continue. You've seen this low here, then another low, then another low. So as long as that continues to hold on the downside, those dips look like better opportunities. But I'd be watching for finally taking out this level on the upside, which is around 1445. It starts to hold above that on the BTC pair, then that looks like a good break from this downtrend, and I'd be looking for some more upside continuation on that name. So going back to the BTC chart, again, just remember, this is a little bit of a bounce. So far, it looks good. Again, the higher time frames look positive from some of these alts like ETH, but I'd be watching this bounce here, especially as we head into this little bit of a resistance. How does it react here? Two things to look out for. Of course, if it just continues higher, it's got a lot of resistance to go along the way until about that 10K mark. Getting over that, things really start to negate to this broader downtrend we've seen. But on the downside, if it does pull back from here, does it make a higher low or a double bottom here and then start to bounce over the weekend? That would be very bullish in my opinion. I'd see that as a strong support zone, and then I'd be looking for much higher at that point. But if not, then I expect, down to crack in here. Then we're looking at 91.50, which is that key support level, and then below that around 9K. So kind of an interesting juncture here, a little bit of a decision point, and the same general scenario on the ETH USD pair. Looking for that bounce right into these moving averages, and now it's kind of decision time. Where do we go from here? Getting back over that 270 mark would start to look a little bit more positive. Again, setting up for that bigger ascending base pattern, but we got to see confirmation one way or the other here first. So stock market's also pulling back here a little bit. There's still fears of coronavirus, a lot of news around that. Certain industries are really getting hit hard, and bond prices yields are at all-time lows on the 30-year mark. Gold is going up, so it's kind of an interesting time right now in the global economic space. We've got some elections here in the U.S. coming up this year, and so just a lot of things moving on the plate, if you will. How does that impact the crypto space? Generally speaking, I think if the overall global economy sees a little bit of a pullback or recession, it's going to be interesting to see how crypto responds. Does it act as a safe haven like we've seen here recently along with gold? Or is it the pure risk-off mode and everything kind of takes a hit? My personal opinion is I think it'll initially see a downfall with everything else, but I think it'll be a quicker bounce back, and you'll see that kind of resumption of the uptrend, broadly speaking. So going to be interesting to see how things play out. But for now, again, just to kind of reiterate, still bullish all around, especially for the longer term here into 2020. And so kind of just look at these pullbacks as opportunities on those daily and weekly charts to potentially find good positions to kind of take a longer term swing on. That's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.